I've spoken to over 1,000 members of law enforcement, and I listen to officers of color talk about what they see, whether it's Walter Scott or it's Tamir Rice or it's Tyree Nichols. And they've shared in public forums that officers of color know better than to treat citizens who are white the way citizens of color are treated by law enforcement. They said, we know we can't do that. We might be able to do that to black and brown citizens, but we know that things will change overnight. Law enforcement reform would change overnight if officers of color were treating white American citizens the way all of law enforcement treats black and brown citizens. What do you say to that? Can you relate to that? Do you agree with that? Do you know where they're coming from when they say that?
Sure. So I'll speak very candid, and I'll talk to you about what I think about that. I feel that in that sense, the people of color or the communities of color are an easier target, and that goes along with what you're saying, that there would be an outrage or it would hit the mainstream media if all of a sudden we saw people or officers of color then now bringing injustice to white people.
You said Rodney King. Imagine 12 black officers beating a white man like that. That's what they're saying. This is what the officers are saying. They're saying that you will not see that.
Right, and it seems like it's an unspoken. It's almost like a unspoken policy. It's based in our systemic biases. It's something that's unspoken, but it's just it's something that seems to be just known among the culture of blue. That these are things you don't want to do. The people of color will not be as easy to get representation or assistance from those that will be able to defend them. So it's kind of like an easier way to go. It's if you think about our natural animal instincts, the apex predators always go after the easier targets. Where a lion may be considered at the top of the food chain, you won't see him going after a bear or another animal that might cause him harm back. So then he's going to look around and he's going to look at what is the easier prey for me to go after. And when you're given, I won't say quotas because I can't say that there was ever a quota given to me, but there was major pressure on making a difference by numbers. And so my job was to bring in those numbers, and so that my easiest prey was those that were the most vulnerable. Or if you want to look at it from just your basic animal instincts. Because often we look to the vulnerable as in those who are not as well-versed in their rights, or as in immigrants, or those that are in fear of being deported. So we would constantly go after those that we knew would not say anything.
Low income, low education.
Marginalized communities is where we spent the majority of our time. And it's not to say, and research will show that there is more crime in a low-income, marginalized community than there is in an affluent neighborhood. It's just there's more policing being done in these marginalized communities. So if you have 100 officers constantly policing a marginalized community, and you only have 10 officers policing a affluent, rich neighborhood, obviously the numbers are going to be a lot higher in a marginalized community. And we knew that we wouldn't get as much conflict, or there was most of the people in the poor communities didn't have the type of education, the understanding, the know-how, the resources, the connections to decision makers, attorneys, and friends that could help them if we ever went into those communities and started to shake things up. That's common language that we heard, that I'll just share from my own personal experience that I heard. Let's go out there and mess with people, and and using different language. Let's go out there and mess with people. And so where would we go? To those areas that we knew that it was going to be easier to find, or not to find, but to shake things up, to go and perform knock and talks, as in knock on a door. And we know Fourth Amendment allows us the protection from government intrusion into homes. But we knew that by knocking on the doors of people who weren't educated in their Fourth Amendment rights would, the majority of time, let us in. I mean, I could probably count on one hand how many times I was denied access to somebody's home. We would show up in force, or at least, fully clothed for our own safety. But I consider that as in what must a person on the other side of the door think when you see somebody attired in military, clothing and weapons pointing at you and asking you if I could come inside and search your house.
And you knew you were violating their rights.
Yes, and I knew that it was somebody that probably didn't know their rights, or that was in fear of our presence. And it was almost said jokingly, as in, "Oh, we're getting into this house. One way or another, we're getting into this house because I suspect something is going on inside." But we had no probable cause. There was no direct evidence. If we had evidence, then we would have the ability to get a warrant. But because we didn't have that evidence, we just had a hunch or a suspicion at time. We would go to the easier homes or the easier communities to be able to go and shake things up. And then that would give us the numbers that we needed, and we could go home and give each other high fives that we seized possibly drugs. I'm just wondering what would happen if we went to the other side of the tracks and did the same. We'd probably get a lot more rejections, as in not allowing us to come in. The people that were educated in
less success for you.
Yes.